Hi, I'm going to tell you the truth about all conspiracy theories and conspiracies in the United States. Okay, so a random YouTube comment on a random YouTube video on a random date around 2 years ago stated, "They hurt us, then we fear them. Then we are angry at them, then we hate them." Now, he was talking about the government, so keep that in mind. So, and I'm reading off a script, so bear with me. So this YouTube commenter brings up an important point. When the government does wrong to its people, it makes its people afraid of the government, naturally. There are two effects of this. Either you appease your government when it does something wrong, which makes you more likely to be okay with the government doing things wrong in the future to a greater degree and more heinous crimes, so to speak. This makes you more likely to be a government stooge, which is what the government wants most. The second possible effect is that you fear your government outright. Ultimately, if this happens, you hate your government, but you're never going to do anything about it. So what it comes down to is that when your government does bad things, you either become a government stooge, where you defend their every move, which is what those in control prefer you to be, or you end up becoming apathetic about the bad things that the government does. For example, when the government does something bad, you say something like, "I hate the government." You think that the government doesn't want people to criticize them, but in reality they don't care because they know you're never actually going to enact change or even attempt to enact change. Or at least very few people actually do that. The government doesn't care which side you're on because either way you're defensive in response to your government. Everything I've said in this video so far has been purely theoretical, but does it work in practice? Let's use 9/11 as an example. On September 11th, 2001, 4 planes were hijacked by a bunch of young Middle Eastern American people, and 2 crashed into the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan and were then knocked to the ground, and the towers were then knocked to the ground as a result of the jet fuel exploding, causing the buildings to collapse. Or it was a conspiracy, a controlled demolition perpetrated by the US government, which then allowed the government to go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses. And it also turned Middle Eastern people, specifically Muslims, into the role that Jewish people were before and during Nazi Germany. Or the US hired 19 Middle Eastern American people to crash their planes into the World Trade Center, again, to allow them to go to war. Now, this last theory is almost never talked about. It does make sense in theory because these Middle Eastern people, maybe they were paid money, or their families were paid money, and that helped their families to get ahead, even though 19 people died because of it, 19 of their family members. It really doesn't even matter what actually happened. So if you believe the government story about 9/11, then you are that government stooge. Conversely, if you believe that 9/11 was a controlled demolition, the government doesn't care because they know you can never do anything about it. Right after the 9/11 attacks occurred, public opinion turned massively against Middle Eastern people, and the majority of Americans then supported going to war, regardless of who it would be against, just for safety, so to speak. A poll performed shortly after September 11th, 2001 revealed that nearly 40% of Americans thought that their life was at risk at the hands of a forthcoming terrorist attack. That 40% of Americans believed they were in danger is absolutely remarkable. So 40% of Americans believed that there was a good chance that they could die in a terrorist attack. Okay, so Even my dad, who lived in a city of 3,000 people in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, said he felt afraid of a terrorist attack shortly after September 11th. Just by the numbers, even if my dad had lived in Lower Manhattan and worked in Lower Manhattan and stayed in Lower Manhattan every second of his life, there still would have been a near 0% chance of him being killed or injured in a terrorist attack. And to think he lived in the boondocks of Ohio and was afraid of what? Afraid that a Middle Eastern guy was going to fly into his house. It's just ridiculous. So, needless to say, a large number of ordinary Americans were afraid of their lives directly because of what went down or didn't go down on September 11th, 2001. Thus, the government knew that people who questioned the official story of what happened on September 11th would be seen by most people as crackpot conspiracy theorists, which they were labeled by the media and regular people, but by the media first. Ultimately, this holds true for anything that the government does, or even potentially does. The government can do literally anything and not fear consequences because the people are afraid of the government. The government is not afraid of the people. What I'm saying is true for any conspiracy or any conspiracy theories that the government perpetrates. The government, more than anything else, perpetrates conspiracies to get its people to become defensive in nature. If you're defending the government, you're being defensive against the government's critics. If you're a conspiracy theorist, even if you have proof that the government has perpetrated what it denies perpetrating, you will also be defensive because you will constantly have to correct the government stooges, and you'll be afraid of the government. The government pits the government stooges against the government critics so that we can't unify as one people of the United States. Even when Edward Snowden released the information about the NSA, many people still defended the government, saying things like, if you have nothing to hide, then what are you worried about? But I'm going to get into the NSA in another video, so yeah. Ultimately, whether you hate the government or love the government has all the power, and you can't do anything about it. You can defend the government all you want, or you can criticize the government all you want. But what is really happening is that the government controls everyone through our thoughts and through what we say. I also talk about thought control and social conditioning in other videos. Thanks for watching. Comment what you thought about what I had to say. Like the video if you liked, and subscribe to be notified when I post another video. I'm going to try to post every day of the week. Thanks, and catch you on the flip side.